Welcome back, everybody. It's William and Steve again. We've been talking about a lot of mental health topics and integrating our personal experiences because we gain a lot from talking about this too. I hope so do you. Today, our topic is on shame. And that can mean a lot of different things. What I'm thinking of is to feel ashamed, to feel an inhibition, to have this holding back, not daring to do what you actually would like to try. Lack of courage, lack of confidence. But we also want to talk about where could it come from?
Yes, yeah, the roots of shame.
Yeah, because I just the other day had an experience that uncovered some experience like that in the past. I could really picture it. It's not like images of a past experience came back to me. It was just a feeling like I was a little boy again, and other children my age were laughing at me and making fun of me with the words, with things they said about me or things they said about my performance. It may have been something like that because in our culture every day we compare ourselves with others or with an ideal.
Yes, what is normal?
And I think one easy thing to make fun of me in my childhood was my religious faith, because I was on my own there. And when there's a group, when there's a clique, they strengthen their codependence and their group identity by making fun of outsiders, right? By setting strong boundaries
Yeah,
and putting everyone else down.
it's anything that's
That's how
different.
they lift themselves up,
Yeah, it just happened to be that religion was the different thing. Again, it's anything that's different, they will pick up on.
right?
It doesn't conform to their, again, ideals.
Yeah, it can be
And
your body weight,
yeah,
anything about your appearance.
appearance.
It's
Yeah,
usually simple things or superficial things, something
yeah,
that's easy to pick up on, and then to say, well, you're not like me. And then of course I'm
exactly.
better, and
Yes.
and I need to, I don't know, somehow shun you.
Yep.
So that happens all the time, not just with children.
Yes.
Bullying happens in the workplace as well.
Well, yeah. Well, again, it's everywhere, isn't it? The shame. We live in, again, a shame and guilt society. Like, it's part of, unfortunately, everyday life, whether it's on TV or in the workplace or um in a religion, in politics and business. It's just, yeah, it just seems to be people's behavior, as you say, because it's different. I guess we pick up on different things, and like you say, like a lot of adult shame, just internal shame, like not necessarily experiences that you experience every day, but things that you've like have internally do tend to happen again, as you say, from childhood. Like that tends to be where most of the deep rooted internal shame comes from. Whether it's from an adult authority telling you you're wrong for something, whether it's other children picking on you, it causes a lot of, again, like emotions and experiences like anxiety, fear, shame are all kind of interlinked. They all kind of have um I guess, very similar dynamics internally. They stop us. That's what it is. It's a barrier. It becomes a barrier to ultimately to happiness and I guess self love and is content the right word? Yeah, like internal peace. Again, it creates conflict. We don't feel like we're good enough, or this part of us is wrong, and therefore, yeah,
But
it's
it's this
destructive.
this blockade, it can only be effective, I mean, be functioning, as long as it's hidden, right? I was I was thinking about asking you why is it hidden, but then I realized that it has to be in order to live on. This gremlin or this negative voice. If
Yes.
it were speaking very openly and explicitly, so that you could notice it. And if you were able to stay in a calm and aware state, then you would be able to treat it like an adult treats a child. You don't stoop to their well, I don't want to put children to them, but you don't buy into their illusion. That's what
Yeah.
I'm trying to say. And then you would be able to you know not negotiate, but just deal with it. And you would be able to extricate yourself from this capture. But the illusion can only stay awake or alive as long as you are not aware of it. And why are we not aware of those negative feelings and beliefs from our past?
Um, I think often we are aware of them, I
Yeah,
think, aren't we? Like we, I guess shame, it's not necessarily visible to other people, but I
right.
think internally we definitely know what it is. Like we know that we can't address it again because of fears. Like again, it's fears, isn't it? Um, so you hide it behind a barrier. Okay, then I guess you squash it down. Like that's the process, I guess, isn't it? It's like
Yeah,
you recognize you have this thing, you try to your brain or personality tries to address it, and you go, no, it's too scary, or I'm too ashamed to address it, and ignores it and just walks away from it. And until you actually face it and go, well, what is causing this problem? Then it's always going to be there, and it's going to manifest in so many different ways.
yeah.
So
So
make it more,
children are experts at suppressing. It's a coping mechanism. Um,
yeah,
I I have seen a child be hurt, and then a few days later, it, it was like nothing happened, and they just carried on and didn't mind being around the person that hurt them. And so I think that's an example of how they suppressed it. And because I assume they didn't go home and talk to someone about it and deal with it and
yeah.
then learn how to deal with similar situations in the future. No, I think they suppressed
Well,
it.
yeah, it all depends on the adults. So if the
Mhm.
child has good support systems around them, then they will. Like if the child has good support systems, like good family, good friends, adults around that they trust, they will go talk about it. They'll be usually it's again before a bedtime situation. Usually it's like wind down and like, oh, how was your day? Blah blah, and the kid will just be like, well, so and so hurt me, and I feel sad that they hurt me. And then if the parent listens and lets the kid express, then actually those things won't be suppressed. But if they don't feel like they can trust, then yeah, like children are good at these things, but again, it's the adults and the support structure that changes everything. Um,
Yeah, I'm not experienced with this, but I love how there are tools to help children express shame and other feelings that are difficult to express or even process, like stories. When they can identify with a character in a story that is going through something similar, then maybe they will maybe they will feel the catharsis of
yes,
the resolution in the story for that character.
yeah,
Or maybe they will role play as that character when you play with them.
yeah,
My nieces love playing fairy tales, like the
hmm
Grimm stories.
yes,
And I don't think it's for this reason. They just love being the princess who goes through some trial and then gets saved by a prince at the end, and and deals with the old witch, who's who's often the well, not often, but who can represent the mother-in-law, right?
interesting. Oh yeah,
And,
stepmother.
yeah,
Yeah, it is interesting how they do that. Yeah, no, kids learn through play, and so stories are play. And an interesting question that popped into my mind was like majority of children, I don't think would ever feel shame again without the adult society that we've created because like they just want to play and have fun. And it's us that tells them no to things. So let's take a simple example. Then you give them freedom to be violent and to be bad, inverted commas bad. So yeah, like again, an example is like let's say they, children, someone will take their toy, and let's say it's a 4 or 5 year old, someone takes their toy, and that child then hits the other person for taking the toy. Now you tell both children off, obviously, and you shouldn't have taken the toy, and you shouldn't have hit, and then the child's going to obviously feel shame for having done something, inverted commas, that we've told them that's wrong. Again, a lot of the time, it's learning what is healthy, I guess, healthy things to feel bad for, and non-healthy things to feel bad for, like not eating your peas and your carrots. Like at the end of the day, yeah, you probably should, but using shame as a mechanic to be like, oh, you're terrible, you need to go sit on the naughty step or whatever because you're not eating your vegetables, and therefore as a child, yeah, you'll feel ashamed that you've not done that thing. And then it's how we deliver, I guess, the punishment, the consequence, the accountability that causes these I guess thought patterns within us. And I guess everyone's different. Like some people will feel shame more than others. Like I was hypersensitive to that kind of stuff, like especially in my early teens, even as a child, where yeah, if I was told off or if I was thought I had done something bad, I would cry and feel awful. And then other people can do that, of the same age, similar environments, and can just be like, meh, okay. So it does depend on the individual. A lot of the aspects of feeling shame, I guess.
We're not parents, so we're not speaking from experience here, as the parents' perspective. But I remember asking a friend, same age as me, who has 3 children, how do you raise your children without conditioning them? And he says, I have no idea. Because it's the problem that you just mentioned. Whenever I also I would need to research this to see, is there at all a solution?
I don't think there's a way. You just have to positively condition. Like you have to try and positively condition rather than negatively.
Yeah. Is there some neutral way to influence a child without planting a seed that will cause pain for the rest of their lives until they uncover it later?
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough.
But let's go into it. You mentioned the word should several times there.
Yeah.
And that is not a red flag, but it's an indicator for us
Yes.
of something going on that we like to point out in this podcast, and that is a thought model. So something that is in your head, an ideal, something that the world should be like, or that people should be like. And then when you tell them or act in such a way that you're pushing them in that direction, then you are kind of implanting your worldview on them. And the younger they are, the more likely they are to take that on. You mentioned sensitivity. That I guess that's what you could call the measure of how quickly someone will take over someone else's belief.
Yep.
And these are beliefs.
Well, it's like politics and again religion. It's so much easier to mold someone into what your belief system is from a young age. Like that's why again cults and these like family traditions are installed in a young age because that's when more settled to it, and it's why generations can stay the same political theory simply for no other reason. They don't necessarily agree like through their own choice, really. They agree because it's always what they've been told is right. It's what they should be doing. And yeah, it's quite remarkable, that influence.
Children are well, at least the children I know, constantly ask their parents for permission to do something, right? Well, because they're kind of trained that way, and if they do certain things without permission, then bad things could happen, and then they learn not to do that anymore. But a lot of these childish behaviors get, well, I don't want to put it down, so I'll call them childlike behaviors,
Yeah.
are then taken on to adulthood, and you get maybe even the majority of adults just waiting or asking for permission for all kinds of things. And then when you're kind of outside of that mentality, you think, well, I sometimes think, well, that adult is behaving very childlike, or first I notice that adult is behaving irrationally. What's going on there? And then, well, it's usually not someone I could ask to
Yeah.
analyze themselves, but even if I did know them, they would probably have trouble analyzing themselves. It's not common for people to do.
Because
You
it's painful. Yep.
just take the easy route,
Yep.
just continue and blame your pain on your environment, other people or circumstances.
Yep.
But
An easy lie rather than a hard truth.
yeah,
Like,
it's sad to see big children walking around everywhere,
yeah.
basically.
And well, we're the same. We have our
Yeah.
aspects as well. Like we have little things that someone will look at us and be like, oh, what's going on there with that level of things? And again, we won't be able to see it until we address it in our lives. And
Yeah.
it's a tough one. It's such a tough one. Because if we were all better at communicating and listening, we could all like learn from each other. But again, we all have to do it in our own time. We all have to be. It's like constantly holding a band-aid ready to go, like a plaster, like a whatever you want to call it, like a bandage. So that when that person goes, oh, am I doing this? Why am I behaving like this? And you go, oh well, I'm here to talk about it. Let's talk about it. So they actually have someone to communicate with that they can trust to express it. Otherwise, yeah, it's never going to be dealt with. And will cause them, like you talk about, the shame creates barriers, which brings a lack of confidence to do things. Like again, like you said, acting like children. We act like children asking for permission to be able to do things, to be able to get that acknowledgement from somewhere else. Where actually it should be internal. We should have
Yeah.
the confidence to just be like, I don't feel shame for, again, my body or doing this thing, like, but we do. And that's what what we're talking about. We're talking about the fact that we have these shames inside us.
I told a friend once that I'm ashamed of something, and it doesn't matter what that was. I just told him I felt so ashamed. And so I was wondering, what did that entail? It meant, well, I'm afraid that other people will laugh at me when they find out about this. It's something that I try to keep secret. It's something that I would rather forget to never talk about again, or I wish it never happened, something like that. So I think we're all familiar with that feeling. And he said, I don't know if you realize this, but shame is only possible if there is right and wrong. And that got me thinking. I still haven't, fully worked that one out, because right and wrong are concepts that are very deeply ingrained in me and
Yeah.
probably in everyone around me. Right and wrong is something that is a belief.
Yeah.
Like I said, I haven't worked this one through, but you could easily define right and wrong. You don't need religion for it.
Nope.
I think most of us have religion in us, even if we haven't practiced it for 2 generations. I think it's still passed
The
on.
culture, oh, it's still massively in our cultures. Like again, in the UK especially, good grief, the amount of like traditions and religious stuff that's still going around, but it's not like, we don't call it religion, we just call it social behaviors and stuff, because it stems from that society
Yeah,
from
you could still
generations
call
back.
us a Judeo-Christian
Yeah.
society for the most
Yeah.
part. Obviously, there's a lot of Muslim influence now.
Yeah.
But anyway,
Good.
it doesn't have
Good
to.
diversity.
You can go into ethics,
Yep.
but we're just raised a certain way. For example, hurting someone is wrong. Uh, Being happy is good, stuff like that. But it's really not that simple. I think I've listened to some philosophers who made me aware that it's even this what you think is objectively right and wrong doesn't have to be correct. Well, even correctness is
Yeah.
is something that doesn't have to exist. For
And that's
example, every species is violent. well, with us it's obvious, but just if you think of nature, every
Yep.
species does whatever they need to survive and flourish, and it's always at the expense of another species, and obviously also inside their own species that they hurt each other. For example, when people compete for supremacy, like sexually, is I think a very obvious example. They like men will fight, and I'm
Each
thinking
other
of
for
animals here,
mates and stuff. Yeah.
but human men do something similar.
Yeah.
It might not be as violent
Yeah.
as gladiators, but it's similar, to get the favor of women.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's not that simple.
No, it's really not. And like, I think from a young age, again, we are taught a very black and white. This is what's right. This is what's wrong. And as humans, we often need that though. Like, so we often as humans, we lean towards getting what's easier to understand. And if you want to understand the world, calling something right and something wrong on the surface, that's just easier. Okay, that
Yeah,
that makes things simple. Um, Once I started to get to the point where I realized that in any specific situation, something could be right or wrong, and then in another situation, the exact same situation could happen, and it actually be the opposite. It'd be wrong in that situation. Like something, a variable will change, tiny variable will change, which makes that situation wrong when it was right previously. And that's why I tend not to try and use right and wrong because they're absolutes. I say good or bad. So, good or bad tends to be not in a sort of not in a religious sense of morally good or bad, but in a I guess happiness or sadness or love and um effectiveness, like constructive, what is not destructive, something that builds rather than destroys. Um, in those terminology helps me go, okay, that was good. And so it might be what's considered a bad situation. I break a leg. Oh no, that's bad. But then in hospital, I meet someone that I get on well with and becomes my best friend. That's
yeah,
good. And I would never have met them. So like again, what is good or bad, right and wrong?
yeah.
It is so specific, but for some reason, as humans, as a species, a generalization here, we can't we struggle to be specific. It
You know,
requires a flexibility of mind that just seems really difficult to do, apparently, for humans.
this reminds me of the problems I have with law. I could never be a lawyer or a judge, and I'm not saying we should get rid of those positions or people. There is a place for them, but I can't take law very seriously because I can't even, well, I'm learning and realizing how humans have this mental construct of right and wrong and ideal and non-ideal, and it's already impossible for thought, for one brain to capture all the nuances and complexities for this
Yes.
to be just right. So it's a dream, it's a farce. And
Yeah.
now think how much more difficult it is to use English sentences to capture what is right and wrong, and to convene people every day to decide whether what happened in real life in an instant fulfilled those sentences or not.
Yeah.
It's just madness in my view. But
Yeah.
again, there is some utility to it, so I'm not entirely against it.
Yeah, no, I'm the same. I really, really struggle with law and again the sense of justice and the corruption that is involved. But again, that's a different topic entirely.
Yeah.
And how again narrow parameters are for well narrow in their sort of like their structure, but flexible in their delivery because a judge can make a decision based on what they judge to be right and wrong. Yes, it's supposed to be within the law, but that can vary from judge to judge, just depending on a specific situation or the jurors. It's supposed to be a fair trial type scenario,
They
but it
interpret the
never
law.
is. Yeah, it's again, it's not fair at all. There's no sense of justice within those constructs.
But would we
Uh,
want fairness? Would we want the same thing happen in the same situation.
Specific fairness rather than general fairness, I guess. So
Yeah,
again, it's how you define fairness. That's again, it's
yeah,
terminology. It's like not equal in in that regard.
right.
So equal, I guess, would be the same for everyone, and fairness, but yet you might define them differently, the opposite way around. Again, it's language, trying to communicate, as you say, like you said, how it's so difficult to communicate in just these sentences and these words that we use to define where, yeah, what should be done in, again, right and wrong, good and bad situations. And I think like I've thrown that off. Like that's how I don't feel shame anymore. Like I very rarely, if at all, feel guilt or shame. Like it's so liberating. And that's not a, oh, I'm just gonna go murder someone and I won't feel guilt for it.
Yeah,
It's a realization that as a person, my choices like are not going to be anything that deserves shame, like or guilt. Like I'm not gonna go steal something. Again, like I'm not gonna go um uh just attack someone on the street or whatever. And so internal stuff, like I don't have to worry about my choices.
yeah.
Um
I'm glad you mentioned that because I have actually asked one or two people before, and they said, I don't want there to be anarchy or, absolute freedom of choice, like as in radical freedom of choice,
yeah.
because I'm afraid of these things happening. And I asked, are you afraid that you would become a crazy person or harm others? And they said, yes. So if you can't even trust yourself
Yeah.
to be a good person, that's not the ideal expression, but if you
Yeah.
can't even trust yourself, then I understand how you want to be strict, how you want there to be punishment.
Well,
Um,
I take that scenario you just said, if it turned to anarchy, I'd be okay with hurting people. If it was required for me to defend my family
yeah,
or like provide food, whatever, to protect them. Like it's learning that you're okay with these things. It's learning to be because again, we're taught that we shouldn't do these things. We're taught we shouldn't be violent. And actually, in specific situations, violence is actually all that's left. It's all you need. It's what is actually required to make the outcome situation a constructive outcome. Um, and it's accepting that that's okay. Like it's this again, this delusion that we're a sinner or we're wrong or we're bad for making those choices if they happened. And again,
yeah,
we're projecting choices that don't even exist
yeah.
and causing shame on ourselves. That's how like crazy it can be inside us as human beings.
It helps me
How
to
difficult.
sometimes imagine I'm an alien and watching humans from the outside perspective, not as a
Yeah,
participant. And then
yeah,
they're like an ant farm and they just do their thing. And yes, people get hurt in the process, but it's part of the process and it's unavoidable, no matter how much they constrict themselves. Well, and for every limit you put on yourself or your society in the name of protection, there's some form of suffering that results from that as well. So it's impossible to find some explicit system that works well. I
yeah.
I don't know if you could even say that one works better than another. I probably, like if I think of dictatorship, mass murder, but we're
Yeah. Well, see,
talking
those are yeah.
we're talking in absolute terms here. Like there is no system that is absolutely good for everyone always.
And that's the key there for everyone. So yeah, so we have
Yeah,
to be flexible with the systems and be okay with being like, okay, well, this will work in this situation, this will work in that situation, and then it won't work in another situation. And that's okay. We just have to learn to be adaptable in the now. Again, you talk about past and future. That's where shame comes from. Shame comes from again thinking we're going to do something wrong,
yeah.
so we feel shameful for it, or the past that something happened and we feel shame for that. Um, that usually is the root.
Avoiding shame should not be your decision making base, right? It
Yeah.
it shouldn't be what drives you. Ideally, you are passionate about what you do. You just do it because you enjoy doing it,
Yes.
not to make money, not to be better than someone else, not to fulfill some duty, not to avoid something negative, just because that's who you are. That's what you do. At least that's what I strive for, or that's what I would like to be the case more and more. You
Yeah.
also reminded me of a Star Trek. I can think of several episodes in the different series where the humans, or the Federation people encounter a species that is totally new, and their behavior appears violent. They're
Yeah.
hurting us. They just destroyed one of our planets. We have to stop them from ever doing this again. We have to use our biggest weapon possible. And unfortunately, there are karma heads who say, we have to be diplomatic and speak to them.
Yeah.
And it's entirely possible that what they're doing is just moving around or farming, mining in this particular episode I'm thinking of. And once we make them aware, that they're trampling on ants here, maybe
Yes.
maybe maybe it will turn out that they're actually very empathetic and they will stop
Yeah.
doing it just to protect us.
Yeah. That
But
hadn't
we will
realized.
have to show vulnerability because they are superior, they're stronger. We will have to just appeal to their goodness, to their
Yeah.
good faith. We cannot force them. And so many people think that it's necessary and the only way to be safe or happy is by forcing others to stop doing whatever is bothering you, or to
Yeah.
conform in other ways.
Yeah. That acceptance of just again people's differences is is so important for, I guess, self growth, because often our shames we project on other people as well. Like often we things we're shameful of, we see someone doing the thing that we don't do because we're ashamed of it, and we immediately like, oh, they're bad because they're doing the thing that I don't do because of shame, and
Yeah,
therefore, I'm right doing what by not doing the thing.
they must be
Um,
psychopaths for not having that moral rule in their head that I have.
yes, yes, it's so toxic. Um, yeah, like again, there's so many just avenues to shame. Other than that, talk about body shame a little bit. I think
Okay.
I think that's one that I think I've dealt with to a degree, not nothing extreme. Again, so many people, and especially again women, have to deal with this way more than I've ever had to. Um, in our society, this in Western and well, the specific society that I am in. But yeah, from a young age, the relationship with my body was very strange because you see the ideal. Again, you should be the muscular man, alpha. That's women will only like you if you are, again, big, strong, dominant. And that's a cultural thing. Then you also have, again, I was raised religious, where you have the religious thing where it's like you have to be cover up your body, you have to and they didn't tell you your body's bad for it, they told you the opposite. But the effect it has isn't as crystal clear as that. You can tell someone their body is, you should look after your body and it's important to be modest, etc., from a perspective of love and kindness towards that body, but actually it has the opposite effect because or it can have the opposite effect. Your relationship and dynamic becomes very complex because you're hiding it. You're hiding what is
Mhm.
you, your what
It,
contains your personality.
it becomes taboo because of the silence. Yeah.
Yes. Um, and so yeah, like I had some body dysmorphia, some struggles with relationships with food. Um, again, it's cultural as well as religious. Um, and later on in life, still have that shame around my body at times. Um, and at times I've just hated it, have hated my body completely, and just like thought of it as gross and repulsive. Um, when actually, like again, I've had to go through a process of where did that come from? Why am I like that? Again, some of that's just my personality and who I am, and I had to shape that. Some of it is from what I've been taught, and what society exposes us to and teaches us. And the more freedoms I've had with my body, Again, choices, I make the choices. That's the important thing, is choice. It's not I'm going to suddenly go out and just run around naked because then, hey, look, my body's free and I want to like show it off. That's another extreme that it's not about that. It's about just my relationship with it as an individual and going like, okay, like my body provides ability to do so many things. I can walk around and I can lift things, and focusing on again what it can do, not what it can't do. How it looks, what it looks like, again, is a super difficult one. When we're judged so much on appearance, aren't we, day-to-day life,
Right.
and this ideal of what we should look like, etc. And we like it when someone tells us we look good. If someone goes, "Oh, you're looking good today. Wow, look at you in that outfit," or whatever, or "Oh, your haircut's so nice," and it gives us a boost. Where's the, "Oh, you're so lovely and kind. I really like that you're lovely." Again, the focus sometimes in society, I feel, is very much, again, it's all about appearance, which again leads to a feeling of inadequacy, a feeling of not being good enough, a feeling of shame around not being good enough. And so, yeah, had to overcome that and learn to just love the way I am. And that's tough. Again, we talk about the pain when facing a hard truth. Yeah, because I could just suppress it. I could ignore it. I could be like, whatever, don't care. And that gets me through day to day. But
Yeah.
actually, the reality is deep down, there is a level of care there. There is a level of sensitivity there that has to be addressed.
So let's talk about the healing.
Yes.
What's the solution to this problem of, so we've mentioned some views on the problem. So there's some trauma in your past,
Yep.
some ideal or belief was transferred to you from someone else, and then you carry that belief. You have a blockade inside of you that gets triggered, and you don't really understand what's going on. You just feel that negative feeling, and you try to suppress the feeling because you don't want to do the work of understanding it. But let's try to understand it a little bit. What was I going to say? Oh yeah, grieving. Grieving is the antidote, because what you're doing is identifying with an ideal. Yeah, for example, the alpha male that you said.
Yep.
You think this is who I am, or at least who I should be, and I'm not. So I need to, I don't know, punish myself or work really
Yeah.
hard or hide, whatever your coping method is, or hurt others when they point out to me what I don't want to think about.
True. Yeah, that's one way that people do. Yep.
But yeah, so we mentioned facing it. So becoming aware of the problem, taking time, calming down the brain because it's
Yeah.
constantly busy looking for escapes.
Yeah.
Just let the negative feeling happen. Let it go through
Yes.
you, and don't, what's called bare knuckle it. Don't or
Yeah.
white knuckle it. Don't try to resist it. Yeah,
Yeah.
actually just suffer.
Feel. Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
suffer.
Yeah.
And the brain will reward you afterwards
Yeah.
with dopamine or whatever,
Yeah.
so that you will feel, wow, I just broke through something. I just achieved something.
Yep.
I need to try this strategy more often. And then you're able to be less, in psychology they actually call this arousal. We're used to that word from sexuality, but in psychology in general it means being like freaking out, having an
Yeah.
emotional response to something that is not rational.
A stimulant, like, yeah.
Yeah, so even though there is no threat, there you perceive one because of the
Yes.
beliefs in your head. So
Yeah.
becoming aware of that process, watching your emotions and your thoughts from the outside, if that is at all possible. I know how difficult that can be.
Yeah.
Talking to someone can help you get an objective perspective.
Like that, again, therapy, talking to friends you trust, all these different things can help. Confirmation of the reality.
Yeah.
So this, like, again, we talk about right and wrong. So in society, they've created this alpha male, if we keep using that example, but that's not right. Like it's shown as right, like, oh, that's what you should be. Again, the term should. Again, I hate that
Mhm.
term, but I still use it in the wrong context sometimes.
True.
But in this situation, yeah, this is what we're told we should be, and then realizing the reality that that isn't what we should be. We shouldn't be that. That's it, that actually that doesn't matter. That especially in today's society, that actually being that way is more often toxic than anything else. And realizing actually, well, what do I want to be then? If I'm not this, what they say I should be, what should I be? And there's, we can choose to be anything we want. That's
Yeah.
the thing. That's the freedom that we have, again, with our bodies, with the way we look, with how we feel. It does come back to us. I used to always hate this so much where people will be like, oh, it's your responsibility, don't be a victim, blah blah. And I'm like, well, it's not that simple,
Yeah.
because actually it's more complex than that.
Yeah.
But at the root of it, it is we need to take control and grieve, as you say, like make the choices. Again, control's probably too harsh a word, but go through that process of taking back the power,
Right.
and realizing that we have that power. And it creates, again, like you say, the grieving creates a really healthy acceptance
Yeah.
of pain and suffering. And then again, the reward system that takes place, again, the talking about it to people will then sometimes allow us to grieve, like opening up to someone else will allow us to have that process. Again, realizing the reality that actually all these right and wrongs are just created. They're not actually right and wrongs. They're these ideals,
Right.
realizing the reality of a situation. And I think that's one thing human beings struggle with is reality. Is what is the actual parameters here that are right, again, the real. Again, saying an alpha male is the ideal person, it's not real. And therefore, yeah, we've been programmed to believe what's real.
Right. Yeah, I have that question too about reality. And I think the only way to, we always perceive reality through a lens, through a mental model. We interpret it. We don't see it directly. But I believe it is possible to see reality directly.
Yeah.
And it probably takes a long time, but it's getting rid of all the beliefs. Just
Yeah, it's the difference
emptying your head.
The difference between passive and active. Again, if you passively do things, you're just going to believe, probably, most likely, what you're told. If you're passively just looking at reality, watching TV, watching the news, watching magazines, all these different stuff will shape your reality. Your brain will just absorb it. If you're doing it passively, if you're doing it actively, then you kind of create your reality. Like you decide what is real. But when you're doing that, you start to realize what actually is beneficial, what is constructive, what is happiness, what do you want to be as a person, like what you are naturally, because again, we all have our natural ways of doing things or our learned ways of doing things. But then we can decide not to do those things. We can be like, actually, we can take time to not feel ashamed for something that doesn't need to feel ashamed for. Again, it has its place, I think. I think it does. I think shame probably has a very minute importance, but I think there are so many other healthier ways of doing things. Like when you teach a kid that something's wrong, rather than telling them that they're wrong and they're naughty and they shouldn't do that, yada yada yada, you communicate with them. You explain why. You give them options, and like you explain empathy again. You explain like, well, what if someone did that to you, and yada yada yada. You go through all these processes over time, over months, years, repeating it. And rather than just telling you wrong and you'd be naughty. Like that's literally like some of the worst things you can do.
I want to mention one more thing about grieving that a psychologist online made me aware of. Grieving is the opposite to identifying. I love to talk about identification on this podcast because it's like an amazing insight that I'm getting more and more. That when you have a belief about the world or yourself, then that could, if it were just a belief, just a message, it could just vanish as soon as it came back to you, right? It could just come and go, and it wouldn't really change you. But when you identify with a belief, when you hook into it with everything you are and have, then it becomes that lens through which you experience everything. And so when we grieve, so where do we know grief from? From loss, right? Especially when a loved one dies. So we lose that connection, that closeness with them. And when an idea or an identification in our mind dies, it is painful because we feel a very similar loss. A part of us just died off. And that is probably one of the basic reasons why we never want to deal with the ideas in our head, why we certainly don't want to get rid of them. I mean, as in let them go, suppressing
Yeah.
or resisting them does not get rid of them. That
Yes.
just emboldens them. But realizing that you are not that thing or that idea makes it possible for you to let go of it and then to just be more empty in your
Yeah.
identification.
And to some people that would sound bad. Like, oh, and again, then who are you if you're empty of that identification? And it's like, well, again, it's freeing. You feel liberated because you're just back to being, I guess, not necessarily a blank slate, but like a more, again, flexible,
Mhm.
um, yeah, more flexible systems. Like if you talk about belief systems,
You're less of a machine.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, you become more organic. You become more organic in your thoughts and the way you do things. No, that's really good. And again, loss and grief and everything is a huge thing that I've been trying to like learn about constantly over the last sort of 10 years in my life. And again, these processes take time. Again, I always repeat this quite frequently in the episodes, being like, yep, some people will do it this way. Some people will literally like open every wound at once. Like they'll hit a barrier in their life, and they'll suddenly all the shame and all the belief systems will just open up, and they'll have like massive breakdown, go
Mhm.
through a process, and have to deal with it over time. Some people will do it little by little. They'll go to therapy once a month or something, and just pick away at different things. And it's up to us how we. So sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's an impulsive, instinctive reaction, but it is, ultimately down to us to, work if we want to work through these things and face these things, and it will lead to happiness. It will lead to again that empty, again peacefulness, like you say, like we use the term empty, but I think it's a serenity, like a connection. It's a connection with like the universe. Again, that sounds so like hippie type mentality, but yeah, it's beautiful getting rid of things like shame and being able to accept. Because again, we talk about acceptance being so important. These parts of ourselves, because like you say, if we hide them, then it just festers. It just festers so much.
You've mentioned the word acceptance,
Yes.
and I have often struggled with that concept. And maybe you've told me you've given me the advice to be more accepting for several years now, and I think it never sunk in. It never made sense. Maybe I had the wrong idea of what that word means in that context. So
Yeah.
I'll put it another way, and maybe this will help someone out there who has the same kind of struggle. Um, so when you accept something being the way it is, it doesn't necessarily mean you're okay with it, that it's
Yes.
good that it's that way and it should be that way. It just means it can mean you tolerate it, you allow it. Um, it life goes on even though it's
Yeah.
that way. That's the kind of acceptance, right?
Yeah.
So
It can sound. Sorry, go on.
not feeling the need to correct it, to change it,
Yeah.
uh, being okay with it being in conflict with your worldview,
Yeah.
and so just letting go of trying to resist the river and flowing with it.
Yeah. Acceptance can sound like a giving up. Like acceptance can very much sound like you're giving up on your integrity, on your belief systems. But you can have those belief systems and accept the reality that you can't change it currently. Like the only thing you can change is again your attitude towards it. And so internally, let's take the justice system that we talked about earlier, where I can't go out there and change all the laws the way that I feel actually would be more beneficial to society. That I hear other people say would be more like, again, it's not just me. Like I constantly hear people complaining about it and saying this is it's too um like there's not enough justice, there's not enough punishment, there's not enough blah blah. Um and I'm just like yeah, it frustrates me, it angers me. I can't go out and do those things. You know, the instinctive response is that's wrong. I want to be able to go out and do that. But my acceptance is that, you know, all I can do is be good to other people around me. If I see something that I feel is wrong, help out. And that's it. That's literally all I can do. I can report crimes if I, you know, that kind of stuff, blah, blah. But actually changing the system, no, can't do it. So at least not now. You know, maybe if I was, you know, if I was of the mindset, I could go study law for 10 years, 20 years, and could start trying to change little bits of the system. But do I have that energy or that focus? No. Like, I've got other things that I want to prioritize, so I have to accept that. Otherwise, it festers. And so yeah, it's good to point out that acceptance isn't a giving up; it's a letting go almost, but maintaining the knowledge that you are doing your best, that you're doing okay within your system. Because like Fight Club, The Matrix, they all talk about letting go and freeing the mind, and that's kind of the philosophy they're talking about, is acceptance. And once you learn to do that, you actually feel more in control. You feel more in, like, able to change your own reality and your own system. I think it's, again, I've read the book a few times, Stephen R. Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I think that has a few, like, all these buzzword books and motivational books, they're very cliche, but they have truth in them. They have abilities to things you can do and adopt and use at different times. And in there, it does, I think, yeah, it talks about your circles of influence, and acceptance has a massive influence on your circles of influence.
And the first habit is taking responsibility. That's also something I connect with acceptance. So
yeah,
what do I feel responsible for? If I take on more responsibility than is healthy or realistic,
oh my goodness,
then I will feel overburdened, overwhelmed, not in control, just a victim.
That's a good one. I think maybe next time, if you want to, responsibility, I think actually that's a very good topic potentially to talk about, because yeah, if we take on too much, it can just cripple us.
Yeah.
And it's all, again, a lot of it is just in the mind. A lot of it is just in our mind, we take on those responsibilities when actually we don't need to. But yeah, no, it's a really good chat about shame and how we can, process, face it. And I've really enjoyed being able to chat today to you about that, William.
I hope it was helpful for someone out there.
Yeah.
And for us as well, to realize these things more and to be able to deal with it better. So thank you.
Yep.
Bye.
Bye.